So now that our object is ready is modeled, we are ready to UV the model so that we can then texture. So the UV tools inside of Maya have gotten significantly better over the years, and it's actually gotten quite simple. But we first have to just understand what UVs are. So to do that, I'm going to create a cube here on the ground plane. And if we go up to the UV editor, that would be just under UV editor, you'll notice that there are corresponding vertices, vertex, for the cube. That one goes there, and so forth, right? And that this faces are also corresponding, right? So every vertice in a polygon, you have a corresponding UV, and that UV is sort of the cube is basically unfolded onto a flat surface, and whatever you place on the UV space in terms of texture will appear here on the 3D model. To demonstrate, I will open up the Hypershade and we'll just create a new shader. You gotta be careful, these windows really like to get thrown around. Okay, so I'll make a new blend, and to that blend, I'm just going to make that full screen for a second if I can. There we go. So I'll make a blend. We'll go ahead and call this just our checker. Alright, and to that checker we will add, or to that shader anyway, we'll create a new checker node, and we'll middle mouse that into the color attribute. Alright, and so now the checkered pattern is being displayed here on this ball. I'm going to drag this down, and now we're going to apply, we're going to select the cube, right click, assign material to viewport selection, and at first nothing really happens, and what we need to do is we need to turn on our textures in our viewport. So we'll turn that on, and now we see the texture applied to the cube. Let's close down those windows and just take a look at this. I'll probably do some more editing here in the attribute editor. So I can take a look at the color, and into the color you see is the checkered node. You can change these colors to be whatever you wanted them to be. And every texture node, whether it's Maya generated or whether you've created it and loaded it, is going to have a placement node. So this place 2D texture kind of tells Maya how to apply that texture to the UV space. So in the UV space that is covered from 1 to 1, 1 in the U, 1 in the V, we are repeating that 4 times. So if we were just repeating it 1 time, you'd end up with something looking like that. And if we look at the UV space in the UV editor, this is what we're getting. We're just getting a 4 pieces, and there you see how these UVs are being moved. And if I were to move that around, you see the UVs in the viewport are changing accordingly to how I manipulate the UVs. If I go back to the checker pattern and go to the placement node, I can repeat 10 by 10, and there you see I've got even more. If I keep it multiples of 4, just by default, I know that I'll end up getting perfect squares on each face. Now let's go ahead and apply that same checker pattern to one of the things we've modeled. Go to my Hypershade. And we'll just apply by middle mouse dragging. And what you'll see is the UV texture, the texture is getting very stretched. So if we look at our UV editor, and we reselect our object. Let's hide the image so we just see that. You see that these UVs don't correspond very well with the shape of this object. When we turn on the texture, you can kind of see why those UVs are not appearing as squares. So this has not been properly laid out. The UVs have not been unfolded in a way that would give me no distortion on my texture. So we have to the UVs that Maya generated when we started this model are not working, right? So to work on this, we're going to use some of Maya's UV tools, and they are much better than they used to be. So I'm going to go to the UV editor here. Bring that off. Off here is my UV toolkit. I'm going to go ahead and dock that right there on the side. Usually you should open up with your UV toolkit. If the UV toolkit seems to disappear, just go back to UV, click on the UV editor, and it should show up. It's part of the UV editor. So now let's go ahead and work on the UVs for this object and see make something a little better than what we have currently. One way of doing that is just creating new UVs and just saying automatic. And you'll notice that it just takes that and lays it out. The problem is this is not a very efficient way of laying out UVs, and I'm going to have a lot of seams. So our texture, you'll see, yeah, sure, it's for the most part the texture looks pretty good, but first of all, I still see some stretching, so there is an issue going on. Let me just isolate selected. But also we know there's going to be some seams, so we're going to have problems where, you know, the checkers are going this way and then they're kind of going straight there. And so there's going to be problems with having so many shells. Each one of these is considered a shell. As a matter of fact, you can go and select by shell this way. You can kind of see each shell. So to try and keep it into one shell, if possible, it would be optimal. The other thing that's problem is, even though I did automatic layout and this looks pretty well, I shouldn't have any distortion, I still have some. You need to make sure you modify freeze transformations before you do any new UVs. So do that, and just by doing that and doing a create automatic, I'm now going to at least get uniform checkers. But you can still see how obvious the seams are in those areas. So we have a couple ways to try and handle this. One is, now that we've cut it up into the different shells, we can stitch the shells back together. So to demonstrate some of those tools, let's just open this up and we will start to stitch. Here I will start to locate one edge for one polygon. I'll grab another one, just like that. And I can do let's just shift grab, shift, 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 shift. And let's do on the cut and sew option, we will stitch together. There we go. Looks pretty nasty at first. We'll take care of it in a minute. We'll grab the other side and we will stitch these guys together. Let's grab that one too. Stitch. So it kind of moved and it stitched it. We've still got a few more that we might want to attach, so we'll just pick this side arbitrarily and move and stitch. And I've got a few more, so we'll just move and stitch that one. Where's this one going to end up? Sure, we can probably just find either one of those edges should probably be okay. Stitch together. And now I think we've only got one shell. So that's good, but they are not very clean. So we will now grab this and we'll go to our unfold and we'll just say unfold. And there Maya is basically running an algorithm. It's doing its very, very best it can to unfold these UVs for me. So we can do that. We can click on optimize a few times and see what happens. I notice there's a couple seams I might want to stitch, so I'll go ahead and stitch those together. We'll actually sew them. There we go. So grab my shell again, and we will unfold. Unfold, unfold, unfold. And now we see we only have one seam running right here. The rest of these are seamless. And I can rotate these UVs and put them in a place that will be relatively easy to texture when it comes to putting, you know, wood grain and stuff like that across. And I don't think you would ever really see too much distortion, say for example in the curving, even though these tiles are being curved a little bit and here they're straight, it's not going to be a big deal. I think I'm going to be okay. A little bit of cleanup still to go. I might grab a couple of edges and we will sew those. So go back to our sew tool. We will sew them there. I might actually break this one off, so I will cut and then I'm going to grab a different edge if I can. I don't really have another edge, do I? That one goes there, so let's just stitch it over there. At least it will be symmetrical on either side there. So there we go. Let's just do another little more unfolding, optimize, and selecting the shell, rotating and positioning into place. The move tools inside the UV editor, we have move, scale, and rotate, all very much the same as inside the viewport. So I'm scaling. That makes the checker pattern bigger or smaller. I can actually check on this checker pattern, and Maya will give me this UV checkered with that written on it. This is very useful to make sure your UVs aren't backwards. So here, if you're like, hey, my letters are backwards, I need to flip this. So you can go to your transform over here. I don't know why that just got semi-transparent. That's unusual. Back to normal. So we'll go to transform, and down here in the lower part of the transform area we have a flip. There it is, flipper there. So we'll flip it, and now let's see if our UVs are good. Now we are no longer flipped. That's good. Okay, if you want them right side up, you might just flip it that way. At least now you know you're right side up. Okay, so that's tool number one. I think that kind of pretty much goes over the basic automatic. There's that process of doing an automatic layout and then stitching things back the way you want them, right? Let's look at another option that will help us just do it right off the get-go instead of this sort of like piecing things back together. Alright, so we have another version. We're going to go ahead and UV this piece right here. Let's isolate the selector so we can just have a look. And there's the UVs. As you can kind of see, we started with a cube, so as the cube foundation for a UV layout. But then I kind of added a bunch of subdivisions as we modeled. But as I transform and move the model around, you can see here, even if I were to manipulate vertices, the UVs don't move with it, right? There are some options inside of here in the in your move tool to say preserve UVs, and it has a hard time even moving these and preserving the UVs. So there you can see if I find a spot there, I can move it and it will actually adjust the UVs. But big transforms, just no way. It just doesn't. It can't keep those UVs. So every time you make a move to the geometry, you're going to have to go back and make changes to your UV editor as well, for the most part, unless you have this preserve UVs turned on, and it actually lets you move the vertices. So let's turn that off and close our move setting. So you can see in the viewport, when I have it selected, it shows me the edges of the UVs, right? So there you can see, if you don't have the UV editor open, then they will not highlight. But with the UV editor open, I have it on my other monitor, and I reselect it, then it shows me the borders. So what I want to do is I want to kind of reset this whole thing, because I want to be in control of where these borders are. So to reset the UVs, right, so I'm going to go in here, open my UV editor, edit, delete. That just deletes the UVs so there are no more. I select it, nothing exists. They have not been created. So, without any UVs, I can't edit any UVs, so I need to kind of create myself a base set of just UVs, but without any actual edges. And the other thing I need to do, of course, is modify freeze transformations. Sorry, there it is. While I'm at it, I might also reset the, delete by history. Edit, delete by type history. Okay. So now with no UVs, I'm going to first create some. So under the create option, we have all these little things here, and I'm just going to do something here called camera based. And when I do camera based, it's going to basically take a snapshot of the object in my UV space, which is fine. That's just gives me UVs and there's no edges that are cut. So now with this guy selected, we're going to want to go in and cut out, determine what edges I actually want to cut. So I'm going to grab my 3D Cut and Sew UV tool. There you go. So this tool can be a little finicky to use, but it's really great. So I'll start by grabbing one, and you can see here's all my shortcuts for the UV tool. It's in the tool settings there. And when I select, I'm going to go ahead and start to point where I want to cut this box into pieces. So I'm going to go maybe to the back side of our box because I know this will be less visible. And maybe even on the bottom or this edge right there. I know that will be pretty invisible. So I'm going to grab, I'm going to shift and double click to the next one. And you'll see it turns a white border. So those UVs have now been cut. So as I come across here and I just keep moving, left click mousing, it's cutting those UVs as I go along. And I know I need to basically cut until, let's say, I'm going to cut about right here. And I'm going to cut that way. That's going to allow that to unfold. The more you do this, the more you'll be able to anticipate where cuts should go and how you're going to get optimal unfolding. I'm going to kind of cut one more there. Alright, so there's those pieces. Now I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say, let's go ahead and unwrap this way. So I'm shift mousing until now I'll double click to there. So now all those just got cut. I know this is going to need to get cut to about there, so I'll double click. And let's do a similar cut right about there. Double click to there. And now one more click there to here. Alright, that should unfold quite nicely. Might get a little stretching here in those corners, but I'm not too concerned about it. So let's go ahead now and we'll open up go back into our UV editor. We'll grab this guy by the shell. Sorry, by the shell. Okay. Does not want to do that, does it? Let's go into UVs first. Move tool. Maybe I'm just in the wrong tool. There we go. So there's my shell. I had to be in the move tool, not in the cut and stitch UVs. And let's just do an unfold. Aha. And you see we got a kind of a similar result as we did before on that other one. But I didn't have to go and move and stitch things around. It just was the very first time I just said, this is where I want you to cut the UV the UV shells, and then unfold it, maybe optimize a couple times, unfold. Beautiful. We got a nice UV piece. I'm going to go into the UV, or my hypershade. And, well, actually I don't even need to do that. I can keep the same shader on. If I just want to check the UVs for stretching, I go into the UV toolkit and I turn on the texture map right there, right? So we can see how those shells look. Let's move the UVs up. So I'll go ahead and go back into my UV shell mode. Let's move it up there so we can see, are we backwards? Yes, we are. So it seems to be very backwards today. Transform, go to our flip and flip them. Now let's see how we're doing. That looks good to me. We're in business. You can see that's where my seam is, right? White border. All right, now I'm good. Let's go ahead and unisolate the selected. So this is the one right here. No, I'm sorry, not this one. This one is the one that has good UVs. Go ahead and turn off the texture so I just see that. Now, these were all duplicates of that first one. And then I just kind of rotated them or transformed them a little bit. So I want to transfer the UVs, the good UVs from this one onto this model over here. So there's a great tool in Maya for that. It's called Transfer Attributes. So I'll grab this one, and I'll grab the next one, and let's see if this works. Well, let's hope it does. Under Mesh we have Transfer Attributes. All right, we'll go to the option box. And let's just reset the settings and let's see what we get. So I'll just say apply. And what you'll see is this object is what I want. This is my result. What could have gone wrong? Well, right here it's sampling the object in world space, and I think I need to sample it probably in local space or possibly even UV space. So let's try that again. This time I'll go to local space, say apply, and go, what did we get? Oh dear, I locked it into that. Let's pull that off. Okay. Let's pull that down. This is my first one. There's my second one. Oh dear. Nope, that is not good at all. So let's see if there's another transfer attributes option. UV space. Let's try that and say apply. Oops. Nope, once again, that is no good. Let's try component space, apply. Perfect. So component space, that's what it's looking for. It's basically lining up the vertices of one object to the vertices of the other, and I have the exact same UVs. So let's go ahead and transfer attributes from this one to this one. I'm going to go ahead and say to all these guys first, we better freeze those transformations. Modify, freeze transformations. Whoa. Edit, delete by type, history, modify, freeze transformations. There we go. Alright, so now we'll go to here. There's my good UVs. He's got good UVs. Him to here. Apply. There we go. I'm not sure how many I can do at once. Let's see. Yeah, that doesn't like that. Wasn't sure what to do. So I just do one at a time. But man, is that a great thing. Not only are all the UVs laid out for each object now, but they're laid out exactly over the same area. This is really nice because when I texture them, as you see, the UV space will be the same for every single one. Oops, missed one. Okay. We go across here. Oops, wrong one. Ta-da! So nice. That is a great tool. Here I can do a similar transfer attributes and hopefully it works. I think I have to go through and do a edit, delete my type, history, modify, freeze transformations. Now what's interesting is it kind of created, not sure why I did that. There's a lot of shells there. See, there's all different kinds of shells. This one's not quite like that. Let's see if it does it the same here. Yeah, that did something weird. So I found a better fix for that, and that is this is happening where the UVs are in the right space. If it would arguably work, there would be there's no problem with these, other than moving the shells around is going to be a real pain because I just can't select the whole shell. I have to click drag over everything just to move it. So what you do instead of the transfer attributes via component, use topology, because the topology for each one of these is exactly the same, and there now we're getting the same UV on each one of these. So little adjustment there, but that seems to be working just fine. So now we all have the same UVs here using the transfer attributes tool, which is great. So let's go ahead and look at a somewhat complex object here with the spool, and we'll see how we do that. So this guy, I call it the spool. It's the axle. I think maybe the way we generated it using the revolve makes me think of it as like a spool or spindle. You will notice, by the way, I have a shaded mode versus wireframe, so you can actually view your UVs very different ways. And a very helpful one actually here, the wireframe just shows you, just the wireframe as you would expect. The let's do it on that. This view shaded just lets me know what UV shell I have selected. So if I had multiple UV shells, you would see different colors for each UV shell on a single object. Then the next view I have here is this UV distortion. This helps me see, is there any distortion over the space? And when I have white, I'm good. Red would be, I think red is overstretched, blue is too small, or something like that. We can figure that out. So you see here on this one, we're getting a little bit of discoloration right here and right there. These are the curved parts, but it's very minor, right? So this is an acceptable amount. This is not. When we start seeing this much color, we know there's way too much distortion happening. I might even just start, just as kind of an interesting experiment, grab this shell, come down, and we'll do an unfold. Unfold. Aha. You can see it's trying to unfold it, but the way that the shell has been cut, it's just, there's no way it's going to be able to unfold that. There's no relief cuts. So we're going to have to do this manually. So let's find a nice way to do this. I'll isolate the selected object, and we're going to come in, and I'll go ahead and edit delete. Then I'm going to do a create versus based on my camera selection. There we go. So you can kind of see, there it is, my UVs. And now let's lay this out. So we'll come underneath here, and I guess I'll actually go back in the wireframe and turn off the UV distortion for a minute. It's a little easier to see my model. Go to UV, and we'll do our 3D cut and sew tool. Maybe I'll just grab right under here, double click all the way. From here I might actually go and I want to stitch some things back together. So to do that, right, how do we do that? Let's go look at our UVs. Look at our, sorry. I guess I have that open. Here's my tool settings, keyboard. So how do I sew UVs back together? It's control, and that will bring it back. So I'll hold control, and I'll just kind of click these back together. I'll go about to there, double click there. That's where I want it to cut. I need another cut probably about here. Cut around that way. This ring should unfold quite nicely. This is a good hidden seam, so I'll go ahead and cut that one. This can unwrap, maybe about to there. We'll cut. You can cut this piece off. That one, and one more, I think. Well, let's put these back together. to a certain point and then double click there. So you can kind of see these colored shells, which I do have turned on the view shaded versus wireframe. I guess it turned itself back on. But it does help me see as I go, each one of these is going to become a shell of its own. So now that we've got them all made, we can come into here and click on fold. I need to go back into my selection tool here, get out of the UV edit mode and just go to there, unfold. And boy, it takes all those shells, it overlaps them really not great, right? We do not want overlapping shells because when we texture, we can't paint on one without affecting the other. So now to handle this, I'm going to use the rearrange. Manually, you would have to just kind of go in and move these things, out together, and then scale them together and position them in the 0 to 1 space as best as you can. Now Maya has a great organizational tool called Arrange and Layout. We'll go ahead and say let's lay out like that, and it just basically tries to fit them into the 0 to 1 space as best as it can, maximizing their size. So Maya wants to give you as much space to texture as you can, so it's gonna do that. Do I want that? Maybe I want to just lay out along one edge there, and so there it fits them as best as it can, distributing them along there, or I can go along the V and do it that way. I'm okay with this. I'm going to go ahead and go to my shell mode and start to move these together. I do like having things close, but I also like having them somewhat uniform in their layout, and to me it's just kind of nice. Move him and right in the side of there. That's where he pretty much would go. He'll fit in there, that's nice. Now I might even start to bring these pieces up. So I'm just trying to maximize the UV space. For now, I'm going to go ahead and keep it there. If I was only using one UV space for one object, then I would definitely grab these all and scale them. Maybe I move my scale over here. Just go whoop. Right, and try to use the best UV space. But nope, here I'm going to keep them there in the corner, and you'll see why in just a second. We've got one more disk piece here. There are some other UV layout tools you can use. And I want to just show you, I'm not going to show all of them, but I just want to make you aware of what you have. So under the UV toolkit for create, we have a cylindrical, spherical, all kinds of different things, right? So this is a cylinder shape. So if I do a cylinder mapping, you'll see it creates this sort of transform node over the top. What I'm going to do is I need to make a few little adjustments to this. Maya doesn't really know how my cylinder is displayed, so I'm going to orient this transform control over the cylinder that way. So now it's actually lined up with my cylinder. I was just rotating it while holding J to snap it and do a discrete move. So holding J can discrete rotate any object. Now I need to go ahead and take this, and we're going to complete the circle here. So grab the transform control. This right here is a little like switch. It goes between like different modes. This allows me to actually complete the cylindrical mapping. Just kind of pulls it all the way around just like that. And there we go. We should have approximately the entire piece laid out. There'll be a little bit of cleanup here. Because it didn't do the backside, it didn't basically separate these two. So to separate those, let's isolate the selected, and I'm going to basically cut off, this and that edge right there. So to do that, let's go ahead and grab our UV 3D cut and grab him, and I'll just go double click. So now I've cut that piece off. That's good. What else should I do? I think it might be oh, you know what? I should probably find out where there's my seam. Okay, so I have seams right here. So that's where it's gonna happen. Let's take these, and I should be able to just move out my move tool. Go to my shell. I should be able to just move one out on top of the other. So this is my inner ring, this is my outer ring. Let's go automatic. Oh boy, I didn't want that. I wanted to lay it out, unfold. There we go. Now when I do the unfold, there, it's going to just put them in perfectly straight. And that will actually be for easier texturing. So I'm happy for that. One issue is, man, that's a really long skinny object. And so if this was like a texture space of like 1024 by 1024 pixels, I'm only going to get to use like 100, not even like 50 pixels tall to texture this thing. So if I wanted to do any detail in this, like put some rivets or something, I just wouldn't have any pixels to paint that with. I'd have to have like a 4K image just to do that. Well, I want to use a repeating sort of texture, I think, for these guys, and I think that will actually work to our advantage in more ways than one. So to do that, I'm going to do this. Oh no, I think I'm just going to do... I'm going to use it, I'm going to scale them up over multiple UV spaces, possibly, right? This is one way I could do it. And then so there, you know, this is going over into another UV space. It's not very clean. I don't really recommend it that much. So what we'll do is we'll go to find out about how much space we want to use for texturing. And now I'm going to use my cut. Go into here and grab my edges there, and we'll go ahead and cut them using my cut and sew. So we'll cut. Alright, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So every 6 one. So every UV space or so. Actually, I can do this will be a little easier. Grab. Move him over to there. I'll scale it up, so I'm basically going to cut right on the UV space. One there, one there. Alright. Cut. So now I have all these shells. And how can I line them up? Well, there's this nice thing here for arrange and layout for stacking. So stacking shells will kind of look for similar shells and stack them. So we'll see if it works. See if today's my lucky day. Come on, stack those. Ah, look at that. Stacked them for me perfectly. I don't think it will stack this last shell because it's going to be like, I don't know what to do with you. Well, it looks like I found a place to put it. So stack. Yep, it did its best job in trying to stack those for me. So now I can move these pieces over here. These ones underneath. Control smaller. And now let's just make sure we're inside that 0 to 1 space. Just a little bit of great. Look at that. I like it when things work how they're supposed to. So now you'll see if I switch into this mode, I'll see all those textures are lining up perfectly. I like that. And as long as I paint a seamless texture, then I should be okay. Just to make sure that these will tile perfectly, I'm going to go into my UV editor and let's grab these shells here. Okay. I'm going to align versus on the edge there, so now they're all aligned perfectly on the left edge. And I'm going to grab these UVs. And I'm going to snap them this way, so now they all align. I'm going to hold X and grid snap them to there. That way when I know they will snap perfectly once I get into Photoshop and paint this texture. Let's do the same thing on these UVs. Just make sure. My move tool, turn off maintain. Retain component spacing. So now they should, there we go. With maintain component spacing, it wouldn't allow these to go onto the same exact plane, but without retain component spacing, now they all snap perfectly to the grid. Okay, good. So I have a perfect 0 to 1 UV space. This is going to texture quite nicely. And just to kind of maybe illustrate that point, if I go here and I add, well, I can even just add this texture. You'll see as I run along the seam, they should line up perfectly. So if they're not lining up perfectly, like I said, a little mistake here, go to the UV editor, and I know, all right, these UVs here on the top edge, they are not lining up. They're not literally, they're not like perfectly lined up across. So to do that, I'm just going to take these and just say, let's just snap them up. You're going to grab our UVs. There we go, and line them up. Probably should have done this before I cut everything. I think that would have worked a little better for me. So, live and learn. Next time you do it better, right? Line those. Align, perfect. I'll move them up a little bit. Oh, that's my issue. Align them. Go. Oops, I'll do that. Line. Line those on the vertical that way. I think I've done enough there. Let's take a look at here. There we go. So now we see those, all those squares are tiling just perfectly, and same thing here. So I'll be able to use a tileable, some sort of tileable texture. This is the one, I think, oddity I have is that one piece because it's not quite 6 exact perfect ones. So that might take some massaging if I needed to have a perfect no seam texture. All right, so let's see what we've got. We've got textures now for all of our pieces. And the last thing we need to do is put them into a single UV space. So to organize your UVs, and when you go into your textures, say you want to just paint one texture for your entire wagon, you would have to either generate multiple textures and have multiple files inside of Photoshop, or you put them all into a single UV space. For this instance, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to put all the wagon wheel parts into a single UV space. To do that, I'm going to select all these pieces, right? And I'll start with these ones because I know these guys are all in the same spot. And I need to grab them, and I'm going to give them their own space. I'm just going to shift them up. There they go. Let's grab this guy and make his UV shell. We'll give him a unique space over here. Then we'll grab all of our outer pieces, which are all overlapping, we'll grab their UVs and move them over this way so they have their own UV shell. And our last one, we'll go ahead and keep him there since that's where he is. At this point, let's grab all those pieces that we want to put in a single UV space. So we can look at them all together and we'll just arrange them in a nice way. Okay? So there's all the pieces. Here they all are highlighted and selected here. So the idea is to get all of these into the same UV space and at a good scale. Very, very important here. Because if I look here, you can see some of the checkers are a lot bigger on this object, say, than these spokes. And the checkers on the axle are much larger than the checkers on these spokes. So we want the checkers to be about the same everywhere. That way when we're painting, we're not, for example, if I painted a wood texture for this one, I would have to scale it up in the, or scale it down rather in the resolution when I move it over to there, in order for the wood grain to match. And that's just a real hassle, and it's just, don't need to do that. Don't want to do that. So to do this, we're going to kind of keep an eye on these UVs here while I rescale the UVs in my UV editor. So let's go ahead and I can probably momentarily hide that outliner just to give me some more space. Close some of these windows. Close that attribute editor, and now I can just kind of look at this while I'm looking at my UVs. There. I'm not sure I need my UV toolkit for now. Just need these two windows. You want to grab this mode there. Oops. So there we go. So I know I need to scale these either up or down. Let's see what I need to do. It looks like I need to scale them up so that the squares get about the same size as everywhere else. There we go. So there, those are the right thing. These, we know these pieces here. These ones. Yep, these need to scale up so that their squares match with the spokes. Those feel pretty good. I think those outer ones. Good, so everybody now has UV squares that are about the same size. So that means these are all scaled evenly. We're not going to have any issues. We shouldn't have too many issues anyway. Nothing serious. Now I'm going to grab these UVs and I'm going to start to arrange them in a way so that they're kind of like in a square. So move these here. Might even sort of, I don't know if I want to do any rotating if I don't have to, but we'll see. These guys. I do want to try and leave those as they are. They might end up getting their own UV space because of that. Well, let's see what we can do. I might let them do that. I might deselect. Let's see here. F8. Deselect him. Okay, let's just get these guys on the same. So we'll grab the, maybe move them. We'll keep them there. And looks like these guys got a little misaligned. Maybe I use my UV toolkit to do a stacked shells. There you go. Now they're really good. Okay, so now I'm going to grab them, move them over. We're going to do a transform, rotate that. So it really is a puzzle that you're trying to solve here. I'm going to grab them and scale them together, right? And then I can move them in like this. Now that I've done that, I might rotate these guys 90. Oops. Let's just rotate them manually here. Well, always love that, does it? I'm going to grab those shells and do a restack. Stack these shells too. I'm going to have some slight variations, I'm not sure. Okay. So I'll grab them and scale them up again. So every time I'm doing this, I'm trying to maximize the UV space here as best as I can. Keeping them a little space between each shell because you don't want to have room for painting when you get into Photoshop. Move these guys up just a little bit. Nice. I think this is going to work quite well. Now that I kind of see this together, I have an idea for getting this bit. Let's go back into object mode. Let's get this guy back in there. He almost fits, but obviously he's, what you see is the UVs are much too small, so they're not scaled the same. So what I can do is just grab and scale them smaller until they're about the same. There you go, that's almost exactly the same. Too big. Right around there, and now we'll just kind of move them here. What I'm kind of learning is that I can actually have these be a double, twice as long as I had before. So I might fix those UVs so that then they go across in a double way. Nevertheless, or I could just even do this. I could just put them right here and do a perfect move. Do a V snap. There we go. X snap. Ooh. Go back to retain component spacing. Where's that? Oh, that's interesting. My maintain component spacing doesn't seem to want to be working. There we go. Had to be my move UV tool. That was the issue. Okay, now I can scale that up until we get to there. I'll grab my UVs. And these ones we will snap to exactly 50%. So that'll make a perfect tile for me as well. Okay. Great. So now what I have essentially is all my wheel in a 0 to 1 space. Let's go ahead and move them over. So I'll grab my UVs, and I should have a move tool here for transforming them one UV area. Let's just do a whole thing by 1 and say over. That was interesting. These guys moved too far. Not sure why. Move them back. Okay. They just moved the wrong way. We just have some flipped geometry. That's probably all it is. Where they live. Okay, so now you can see I have all my wheel components in a single UV space, so I can literally paint all of this, all of these pieces inside one texture document inside of Maya. You could scale these down small enough so that your entire wagon would fit in one UV space into Maya, or you can have multiple UV spaces. You know, you have your wheels occupying one UV space for one texture, and then all of your panels would have another UV space somewhere else and down the line. The thing I would say is for homework is just to make sure you have good UVs on all of your geometry for your entire wagon. Here you notice not all my wagon is finished, so your wagon's model should be complete. You should have a bottom and all the other pieces that were in the drawing should be there. So create UVs and make sure all the textures look good, and then make sure the shaders are assigned. Those shaders should be the same ones as you had before. Never mind these checkered shaders that I've been creating. So we'll just go ahead and reapply the wood shader there. Let's see. There we go. Well, that was weird. That doesn't look like the right color. That one's the right color, and then this one needs to be the steel. There we go. And that one will just turn that off. Okay. There we go. So, and you know, likewise, once you've done one wheel, just duplicate that wheel over or transfer the UVs. That one I might just duplicate the wheel a second time. That might be an easier fix to copy those UVs. Alright, there we go. That's the UV editor. There's a lot of stuff in there we probably didn't go over in terms of all these tools and things you can do. So you can always look up in the Maya documentation online, do the Maya help, and see, hey, what is randomize or stack similar? Like, why would you use that? But I think to get your feet wet, it's better just to kind of get in there and start moving these UVs, kind of understand the basic fundamentals of UV layout, and then these other tools, as you read about them, they'll make sense, and you'll be like, oh, that's what that does. Great. Okay, that's useful or not. The tools I've shown you are probably the ones I use for 99% of all UVing. The other ones, they come in handy, or you just never really come across them. Like the measuring tool, I haven't had to use that one before. Pixel distance. A lot of this is even brand new into Maya. We haven't had this kind of wonderful, beautiful thing. There's other old school ways of doing it too, or we use the good old Hedis UV layout, which I do still own a license for. Alright guys, good luck with this. No need to do any texturing. We'll get that started on the next week's homework assignment. But this week, definitely get those UVs done. Alright, signing off.